Now in the next example, the client gave me a birth time of 7:15 in the evening, and she was quite sure that this was her time of birth. So again, I wanted to verify that quickly before I started to prepare for the consultation. Two arcs that I looked at were solar arc Sun arcing to oppose the ascendant, arcing to conjunct the descendant at age 26, right around age 26. The Sun happens to rule the 7th house, and so for me, I thought that there was probably an important relationship at that time in her life, possibly even a marriage. And then I noticed that just 2 years later, solar arc Jupiter would arc to oppose the midheaven at age 28. So there had to have been two very important events in this woman's life that were approximately 2 years apart. That with Jupiter arcing to oppose the midheaven, there was likely some kind of new start in the career or home life. So I asked exactly that, preceded by, give or take a few years either way, at age 26 and 28. Did you have a serious relationship at that time, and then 2 years later, a new start in your career or home life? And her response was, I met my ex-husband when I was 30 years old, got pregnant the following year, and gave birth to my son, my only son, when I was 32. Bingo. So here we see that we are off by 4 years. 26 was the original time that we thought she would have met somebody. It was 30, 4 years difference, and 28 was actually at age 32 when her only son was born. Now we can make a quick adjustment for that. In this case, the birth time should have been a bit later. We need 4 more degrees, so 4 times 4 minutes is 16 minutes. The birth time was given at 7:15, therefore we adjust ahead 16 minutes or 4 degrees, and the birth time suggested would be 7:31, but we're going to verify that. And I did so with 2 more solar arcs. After I made the adjustment to 7:31 p.m., I then confirmed 2 more solar arcs. Neptune in the 9th house would now have arced to the midheaven at age 28. That would suggest a wipeout year. So I asked her, what was the difficult time you had at age 28? Concerning perhaps your profession, feeling that you may have gone off track and needed to get back on the right track. Perhaps as well some kind of wipeout of your ego or suppression of your ego. And her response was that she almost quit her postgraduate degree in psychology, but it was the advice of a professor that convinced her to hang in there, and she ended up eventually graduating. This happened exactly at age 28. The final arc was Peregrine Saturn in the 8th house would arc to conjunct the midheaven at age 49. I asked her whether she had taken on a new profession or a new job, or had a change of status within her family or her career, and as well would have likely taken on either more responsibility in that area. That year, she accepted an early retirement plan from the company she worked for, and with that money was able to refurbish her home, sell it, and buy a profitable piece of beachfront real estate that she rents out on a daily rate. Even today, financially, that year set her up for the rest of her life. I didn't need or have time to convince myself further. I was sure that the new birth time was 16 minutes ahead. 1 degree equals 4 minutes. 4 degrees equals 16 minutes, which brought it to 7:31 p.m. Now, as it turned out, she happened to pull out an old copy of her horoscope that was given to her by an astrologer many, many years ago, and sure enough, the time that was calculated on that horoscope was 7:30 p.m. My rectification was 7:31 p.m. So again, very easy, very quickly to assess this just using a few solar arcs, located in the 3rd, 6th, 9th, or 12th house. Now, what happens if a horoscope does not have natal planets in the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th house, and you cannot quickly assess a birth time based on those variables? Then we have other ways of doing that I'm going to show you now. Now, when we are verifying a birth time, the only thing we're concerned about is the angles of the horoscope. The midheaven IC axes and the ascendant-descendant axis. Certainly the moon will be moving within that day, but it's not the most reliable variable to test out transits to the moon. We want to test transits to the angles of the horoscope. Which transits? We want to focus on the slowest moving transit of all, which would be Pluto. So we want to look for a transit of Pluto conjunct or opposed an angle. If Pluto has not yet conjunct or opposed an angle, then you could look at a square to the midheaven or the ascendant. You may also look at transiting Neptune conjunct or opposed an angle. Now, let's start with Pluto. We know that the symbolism of Pluto, conjunct or oppose the midheaven, or conjunct or oppose the ascendant, is a life perspective change. It is a life milestone. With Pluto conjunct the IC or opposed the midheaven or conjunct the midheaven, depending on age, if we're talking about within the first 12 years of life, it most likely involved parental adjustments or changes in the early home life that were personally very significant. It could have reflected a move, a relocation, a new home. It could have reflected a death circumstance within the family. It could have suggested a change within the father's profession which affected the family. It could have involved a parental separation or remarriage. If it was for someone in their adulthood or teen years, then it could have reflected a first-time job, an identity transformation, a professional development that was life significant. If it involved the ascendant, Pluto, conjunct the descendant or oppose the ascendant or conjunct the ascendant, then we know again that it likely had to do with an identity transformation, perhaps taking command of things, perhaps having to do with, again, death circumstances within the family, or a health concern for that person because the ascendant represents the health center. It might have also had to do with a geographic relocation, and of course a significant relationship start or breakup. But whatever event occurred at that time in a person's life would have been life transforming. It would have marked one of the most important times of life. So you want to ask your client what occurred at that time based on those variables that I've just defined. Now, because Pluto is so slow moving, we know that if, for example, the time that they've given you would reflect a change at, let's say, for example, the age of 19, but the client tells you that no, the life-changing event occurred at age 20, well, then we know that we need to make an adjustment to reflect 1 year of life for that Pluto transit. And the more accurate you can get an event that occurred, for example, if it was a move, a physical move, then you need to try to get the client to get specific with you. What month or time of year did that move occur? Now, you can look to see, based on when that move occurred, whether it would have reflected the first hit of transit, the retrograde hit of that transit, or the final hit of that transit. Oftentimes, it is the retrograde hit that is most powerful for an outer planet transit. So you could adjust the birth time to reflect the retrograde hit because it's going to be in the middle of the first hit and the last hit. And you know that at least you're in the ballpark.